Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia and our special guest, Bryan.
Hi,
Hello.
everyone. Yes, Bryan, you are finally on the show.
Absolutely, and we're coordinated with our dark
I know, look at us.
colors and
We didn't even plan this, but
Yeah, we don't
yeah,
plan it. So this is like the perfect time.
we are so in sync that we even
that's
coordinated
right.
what we were going to wear for our show and the audience today.
If only we had that much time to do that.
That's true.
That's true.
Yes.
Yes. So hello, everyone. Remember, we can't see you, but we can see your comments. So please say hello in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from, and if you're watching on replay, still add where are you watching from. And we're excited about today's conversation.
You bet. And your voice in this conversation is important.
Yes,
You're part of the community, and we love hearing from you.
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
Hi, Claire.
Hey, Claire.
Welcome.
Yes.
Well, we are excited about today. Number one, because Bryan is here. That's number one. And number two, we're really having a conversation about all things food safety. And we thought this was really relevant for Bryan because he hosts his own food safety chat on Fridays at 10 a.m. Eastern time, 8 a.m. Mountain time, right?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. And so Bryan is in the know around food safety, what's happening in industry, what's happening when it comes to consultants, what's happening out in the field, right? And so we thought that this will be a really great conversation to have about all things food safety.
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome, Abby from Alabama.
Yes,
Woo-hoo.
welcome. Happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so since we just asked everyone to share where they're joining us from, whether they're live or on replay, how about us?
Yeah.
Bryan?
Yes, I'm in my usual digs here in Loveland, Colorado. My dog is finally settled down. He's in his bed. There was a squirrel in the yard, and so he was going nuts. And so the squirrels, of course, are like, right?
Right, you can't get me.
Teasing him, right? And so he was all wound up, but luckily I caught him, which is no easy task. And hopefully now his whole brain is going to be squirrel, squirrel, squirrel.
Right, all day.
I felt like that at work sometimes too. Squirrel, 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 squirrel.
And we talked a little bit about the weather. How is it where you are, Bryan?
Let's see. Yes, Tia. So currently it is a lovely 68 degrees. It's going to be 82 today. Nice, beautiful sunny day here in Colorado.
All right. Did you all get any of those extreme heat days a couple of weeks ago?
This time of year, it gets into the 90s and the hundreds sometimes. But unlike back on the East Coast where I lived in PA and things like this, we don't have humidity out here. So you don't have. So what happens at night is the temperature will go down. It'll be in the 50s, and it's pleasant, and then it'll kind of warm up during the day. But it's not like it is in Pennsylvania, where come May you shut up the house, you turn on the air conditioning, and that's that, right?
Right.
It's a little nicer out here from that standpoint. I think it surprises a lot of people.
Yeah, I've never been to Colorado, so that is on my list.
You need to go to Colorado. I've been to every state but one.
Really? Which one?
Which one?
Alaska. Haven't been to Alaska yet.
Like, you can't leave us hanging.
I know. We're like,
tease.
That's awesome. Well, I understand the humidity comment because I am out in Baltimore, so we are hot and humid out here.
Oof.
Oh yeah.
Well, in Minnesota, it's actually cooled down. We've had some perfect weather days. And I hope that's better than Damaris. I see you've joined us. For a while, things were melting in Texas. I'm curious how it is over there right now. So,
yes. And Alabama. Alabama was really hot too. Actually, some few storms came through in the South. I'm originally from Tennessee, so I watched that. But we also got some storms here in Maryland as well. Pretty bad one's coming through.
Yeah.
So good. Well, now that we are all caught up on how we're feeling from an outside standpoint, even though we're nice and cozy and probably comfortable in our homes right now.
Or offices.
Our offices, right? We are happy to be here today.
Yeah.
And if it is your first time, with us on Real Talk Food Safety. We are here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time, talking about what's going on, what's important to you. Sometimes we have guests like today with Bryan, and Jill and I, we started Catalyst so that we could talk about leadership and how do we help leaders become better leaders in food and beverage. And we're both certified coaches, so all of our programs, everything that we do is based on coaching principles. And the reason why is because coaching is really known to help with that forgetting curve, right? That we all hear about when it comes to training, but it also helps tap into your own gifts that you have as a person. And so when you bring your full self to work, or really, honestly, anything that you do, when you bring your true authentic self, your whole being to something, and you are focused on being more self-aware, right? And you really focus on those skills, like we like to talk about it in the field, leadership skills, right? Then you really do show up as a better leader. But that takes intention, and it takes practice, and it takes reflection. And that's what we help leaders do, technical leaders do in the food and beverage industry. And Real Talk is just our time to share, right? With you, with others. And so we are happy to do that every week.
Yes, we are. And that's why today we are so glad to have Bryan, our special guest, our friend, to join us to do, like we said, it's going to be all things food safety.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we didn't even actually script anything. I mean, not that we script things out, but like we usually do some prep where, right, it's a little bit more structured so that we know exactly where we're going. But today, we actually left it open.
Yeah.
So we actually want to hear a little more from the community as well when we ask a few questions to kind of help guide where we're headed today.
Mm-hmm.
So Bryan, there are going to be some people on who actually maybe haven't heard about you or been able to join your food safety chat on Friday. So do you mind even sharing a little bit about who you are and what brought you into food safety to get us started?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thanks, Jill. So I think like a lot of people who work in this field, it's not something you go to college for, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to become a food safety professional, right? There's not much of that out there. Now, if you're European, right, you can go to school and become a food safety professional and learn how to make cheese and all these type of things. But in the US, it doesn't happen. And I kind of fell in to food. So got out of college, worked in medical device for a couple of years, decided clean rooms, not too fun, and found a job at a cheese company, Leprino Foods, as a microbiologist. And so I started working in the lab there and worked my way up. And so then that started off my career, and worked in the food industry in operations and quality, food safety, those type of things for over 20 years. Ran quality at some pretty large companies, and started my own consulting business now about, 5-6 years ago.
And so what are the main things that you focus on right now around food safety?
Really, I think it's kind of two different things. And I think this is where our two worlds intersect. And I think why the three of us all get along so well is that it's really teaching those lessons around those technical aspects of what we do, the food safety blocking and tackling, as I call it, but also the people side, which, oh my goodness, is so important. And being able to communicate and talk with people who are not food safety professionals and get outside of our bubble and communicate those messages. And I think that kind of really dovetails in with what we were talking about before we went live, which was poison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that really leads into, because we're talking about like what's really bubbling up right now when we think about food safety, and whether it's in our industry or whether it's even what's bubbling up that our food safety professionals are maybe thinking about, getting asked about, being faced with right now.
Yeah. So what is the most topic? What is the
pressing thing
talk of the town right now? Would you say?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think it's the Netflix special Poisoned with Bill Marler and those guys. It's all over LinkedIn. Right? You're seeing all kinds of posts from people and things like that. That's definitely getting a lot of attention, which is great. I think it's when I watched it yesterday, it's in the top 10 movies on Netflix right now.
Yeah.
Drop an emoji in if you have seen.
Yeah.
If you have seen the Poisoned documentary yet.
Yes.
Maybe an emoji that, or a yes, no, right? It could be either that too, but share with us, in the audience, like if you've already seen it.
Yes. I know a lot of people plan on watching it over the next couple of weeks with their teams, or with their family. I've seen it. I watched it maybe over the weekend. My days are sort of running together, but I believe it was Saturday when I watched it, either Friday or Saturday. And I was telling Bryan and Jill that I need to rewatch it, just to kind of pick up on some things that people are now talking about on LinkedIn and other areas, right? I want to go back and say, oh yeah, I see this, and kind of just, because at first I kind of just watched to hear, right, and listen and see. And now, I'm going to go back and watch and really listen from like a professional standpoint, right? Someone that's worked in the industry.
Yeah. And what was fun for me was I watched it with my wife, and she's a pharmacist, and so she kind of knows what I do and things like this, right?
Yeah.
But it was interesting seeing her reactions to it. And we had some bagged lettuce in the fridge. Guess what got thrown out this morning?
And did you do it, or did she do it?
She did it.
That's fun. So Jill has not seen it.
I have not seen it.
So we will have no spoilers. That's
okay. You can spoil it, because part of why I haven't seen it is because I'm kind of, like you said, kind of listening and seeing what others are saying about it, so that when I watch it, I kind of have that lens.
Right. Well, Jill, you might not care about spoiling, but other people might care about spoiling.
Okay, that's true. Sorry, I was really insensitive there for a moment. Sorry.
You were like, go ahead. But one thing, which we know we're in the food industry, right, is leafy greens have had such a tough time, over these last few years. And so lettuce in particular, bagged salad, maybe, or lettuce, bagged greens, kind of got talked about a little bit in the documentary. So I see why your wife responded that way.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it was very interesting. And so one of the key things, this was what I was watching for in this as well. And it's very interesting on shows like this, when you're watching these expose type shows, is how people handle themselves and respond to questions on these type of shows, and the body language they use and things like this, which you can really pick up on these type of things when you're watching for them. And there was a very interesting portion in here where they were talking with the head of a organization which was involved with this aspect around food safety. It was some type of growers association with bag lettuce and things like this. And it was obvious to you, and I'd be curious to get your take on this too, is he was nervous. Oh, is he nervous?
Yeah.
And, he was doing things like this, right? And, kind of, these type of things, buying time and showing his uncomfortableness with the conversation. And there was one question that he should have absolutely had the answer to, but he did not. And I was just like, oh, his credibility just went, which was, okay, well, you're head of this new consortium, which is dealing with food safety in the bag lettuce group. Who do you represent? And so he starts listing off all these different companies, big companies that we all know. And a little later in the interview, the interviewer said, okay, well, are you guys making a difference? And he said, oh, absolutely. And she said, okay, great. What proof do you have of that? What studies have you guys done showing that your efforts are paying off? He didn't have anything.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Just the metrics, right? And maybe they do have the information. He just personally did not have the information for this, but I did think that was interesting.
Yeah, so it's just like, okay, you're the head of an organization that is charged with reducing incidences of food safety, and you have no metrics.
Yeah. Or don't know, at least and you might not know all the details, right?
Yeah.
But at least like the top metric, right? That you are searching for, the top one or two or whatever it happens to be.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and that's really interesting. So even as we think about that being in the food industry, when somebody says, how is your company doing that? Like, how do you know you're making a difference? How do you know your products are okay? Like, do we have something where we're like, yes, like we have an answer?
Yeah. It's actually something that, each of us can take away, especially if you're at an organization, is to understand, right? Like what top metrics from a food safety standpoint is the organization measuring, right? And we talk about it a lot too on like the right sort of KPIs or the right kind of metrics. And we haven't done a show yet on this, but I know it's coming for us. It's definitely a talking point. But I mean, we talk about it on like, okay, how's your SQF score, right? How's this score? How's the findings here? But really, like, what is driving change for your organization? What is driving improvements for your organization? And is that really a top metric that your top leadership sees and hears and talks about? So that if your CEO is talking with someone, right, they have that at the top of their mind, because that's one of the 5 metrics that they talk about every single time they're talking about metrics and KPIs and where the organization is.
Yep, absolutely. Because if you ask the CEO of a company, what was your quarterly profit last quarter?
They'll know.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why don't they know your complaint rate?
Right. Or what else would it be about food safety and quality?
Right.
So really an interesting takeaway.
Exactly.
I'm going to pause for a moment. And like, congratulations, Claire.
Yes.
As I'm reading the comments. But really interesting point that there's these certain products that seem to have more conversation about them than others. And how does that even fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah. I think one thing with poisoned, there is this whole concept of like, what is consumers learning, right? And what are they doing with this information? Is it accurate information, right? Is it dramatized, for TV? Like, what are you supposed to do with this? And it's funny, Claire, like as you think about this, I have a 16-month-old. She'll be 16 months tomorrow. So it's really fresh in my mind on like, what could I eat? What could I not eat? And then even thinking about some of the things where it's like, don't eat this stuff, but that the reasons they're saying not to eat that stuff was because how it was manufactured, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. And so that guidance hasn't changed at all, even though the manufacturing processes have changed, right? Or the ingredients have changed, that type of thing. And so it's interesting, Claire, from your perspective, that no one's talking about lettuce or leafy greens in that space. And I can't remember if I saw anything around. I don't think I did either. I just knew, just being in food, that I didn't eat any salad, really. I didn't eat any salad, or maybe that was just my excuse for not eating salad. But I didn't eat any like uncooked leafy greens. So like my mom said, I'm going to have a spinach thing. And I just told her to cook my spinach or make sure the spinach is cooked. So I did do that when I was pregnant, but I think it's mainly because I'm in the food industry, not necessarily that I saw it on the guidance around.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Claire, one of the things to avoid as well is enoki mushrooms. Don't eat enoki mushrooms. Oh my goodness. All the recalls on those for listeria. Oh yeah. Stay away from those, Claire.
Interesting.
Larry, I think that goes into Larry's question, right? When we talk about things, are these based on science, or was it emotional, or because we see that there was a recall or maybe 2?
Right. And I think that's a great segue with what Larry is saying there relative to our conversation before we got on the air here, which is perception is a huge part of food safety.
It is. Real or perceived. What a consumer is communicating to us is their perception.
Right.
It's the truth. To them, that's what their truth is. That's the truth they know at that time.
I think that's one of as the FDA does have a focus on consumer education, right? So we're starting to see more and more talks about consumers and how to educate the consumer. I think a big piece of that, and because we're so technically driven, right? We base things in science. We talk about it from that aspect, and we'll continue to and need to. A lot of consumers really don't make decisions in that way, right? Nor are they going down the path of even understanding what science-based means, right? Like they really are. And I mean, this is just think about yourself as a consumer in another industry, right? That you may not know much about. The things that you know about that industry are really things that you hear other people talk about, right? Or you happen to see something online, or we know social media is flooded, right, with information, whether it's right or wrong. But it really triggers, like Larry, to your point, this emotional response of, I'm going to avoid that because I've been hearing these things, or I might not avoid it because I've heard both sides, or I've heard a really positive side of it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and part of this too, right? And really, this is a good illustration of getting outside of our bubble, right? Is most of this messaging comes from what? Marketing.
Yes.
Right? It's company marketing, and companies are trying to persuade people to buy their products. So we get these perceptions in the marketplace that organic equals safe. No, not even close. And oh my goodness, something I always railed against, raw milk, right? Oh my goodness, raw milk has all these nutrients and it's so much better and it hasn't been damaged by heat and all these other blah, blah. Talking points here from these people. And I'm like, okay, but the risk is far greater for having an infection with pathogens or things of this nature. Oh, but people on the farm drink it. Yeah, but, right? And these things are complicated. They've built up immune systems and they're used to, you can't make those comparisons, but people, no, organic equals safe.
Yeah. And that was one thing that this may be a spoiler, may not be, but that was something that was said. Actually, Bill Marler said that organic does not equal safe.
Yeah.
Right. And that's so important because that is a consumer perception on food.
Yeah. Well, and look at things like farmers markets, right? I'll do it this way. Farmers markets, right? The perception they put forward is that, old Farmer Brown goes out in his field and picks a few things and takes it down into a parking lot. Yeah. Look behind the curtain in the back of the pallets of material that were dropped off from the local distributor. It's the same stuff that's going to the restaurants, but it's being marketed as something that it's not in most cases. Now there are, farmers markets and things like this. Now you have created an environment with things that are sitting out in the sun all day. Are they being properly refrigerated? Right. But farmers market equals better.
Yeah, that could be a whole show in itself. Yesterday, I actually went on a field trip and I took my kids. It was sponsored by Naturally Minnesota, so I'll post something about it later. But it was about regenerative ag. And it was really fascinating to talk with this group and to hear these new perspectives about, like, it's the level past organic, regenerative. Like, how do we take care of our earth? How do we keep so that we are doing more sustainable practices? And one of the women that I spoke with came from one of the certification bodies. And I said, and she's been working in this space for decades, like 20, 30 years.
Wow.
And I said, well, whatever happened? Because organic was supposed to kind of help us move in this path of like different practices and, things that are more sustainable for earth. And it was really interesting because she's like, it all comes down to capitalism. And so even as we talk about some of the things that happen here, like organic being safe, well, it's not necessarily safer. We all know that, but it's also something that's going to bring in typically higher margins for an organization. And so they latch onto it and market that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so there's all these perceptions that are going out even within our own organizations and industry. And how do we approach that? Because that kind of rolls into poisoned.
Right. Yeah. Right. Right. Just the term, right? A lot of people even feels like, which I don't think they really didn't touch that much on being organic versus non-organic.
No.
But a lot of people have this whole notion behind I buy organic because I don't want to be poisoned by things that people are putting on crops and that type of thing. Just looking on social media, you see that all the time, where people are talking about why they don't buy organic.
But that messaging, to Claire's point about even best by dates and use by dates, and Where is this? Is it a balance? Is it a gray area? Like, what can it look like? What do we want it to look like when it comes to what we know and how we communicate that so consumers are better informed?
Yeah.
And not just facts. We know from doing influence workshops and in our program that we know facts are not the things that will drive people to make different decisions. So how do we even message differently to inspire people to know more about their choices so that they can make the one that fits them?
Right. Exactly. Claire, what you bring up around Best By days, right? That's also a pretty big topic that's happening in food right now. And really it's around food security and how much waste, right, we're throwing away, even if it's perfectly good food, just because there's a Best By date on there. And so there's a lot of talk around that on should there be a Best By day? Should there not be a Best By day? Do you eat things after the Best By day? Do you not? And this is just like the issues that the documentary Poison brings up. There's really, like 3+ sides of a story, right? It's the consumer version of it on what's happening. It's the industry's version on it, on like, how do you manage? How do you deal with complaints of, mold, of no flavor, of color, of all of these things? Thinking about the Best By date, how do you deal with those type of things? Lack of sales afterwards, right? Like, oh, this was gross, even though I ate it after the Best By day, right? Like, or it didn't look right. How do you manage that piece? And then government, right? Like, how are you providing regulations? How are you really honestly demanding and providing this framework on how industry is supposed to make product, right? Make product safe for the world. And so like, I look at it as like, there's these 3 different perspectives, right? In order for us to come to a solution, they all really have to be at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And what Claire is saying dovetails again with what Larry is saying, because and my wife, right? And she's a technical person. She's a pharmacist. She's a scientist, right? She's knows what she's talking about in those areas. But once the Best By date goes past on the half and half, she's done. Right? That is now my half and half at that point. She's not going to touch it. And it doesn't matter what I say at that point in time. She will not. Once the Best By date is gone, it's done. And I've explained to her, it's like, no. The Best By date is based upon these optimal conditions with this storage and shipment, with these type of parameters. And the companies are trying to make sure that people aren't going too far over so that we get tons of complaints. And she'll go like, and no. Yeah,
throw it out,
Emotional.
Right. It is. Right. But then it's also, I also think about, I had these like biscuits that expired, that had a Best By date like a couple of weeks before. And I really wanted them. So I baked them, so it's also like the emotional part of like, well, I'm going to see if they're going to bake up, right? If they're going to taste different, if they're going to, and really, with baked goods, that's where you're looking at, right? Like you're trying to, after a while, they just probably don't bake up as pretty as they would before. And so, I remember my husband, Theo, if you all know, is also in food safety and quality. So I'm like, I'm going to bake them and see what happens. Right. And they were fine, right? They were fine. It wasn't that far past, but I think that it just shows too, that even both sides is an emotional thing, right? Yeah. It's not necessarily based on the scientific facts, mainly because the consumer probably doesn't even have that information or that knowledge.
Right. Well, and if you're a company, is it in your interest to go out there and say, hey, listen, guys, we may have a food safety risk with our product. You need to be careful, right? And how's the consumer going to interpret that message?
Yeah. And if only we could have an ideal state where some other characteristic would make it undesirable before a food safety issue made it undesirable or a risk.
Yeah, there's things that pop up every now and then that catch my eye. So, for example, packaging film around that changes color when it starts, degrading or things of this nature. You see now too home test kits. I've seen now where companies are marketing gluten testing kits for at-home use.
Well,
Do they work?
Yeah.
It's interesting. And what is social media, right? How that plays on every piece of this puzzle, right? Social media should almost be its own perspective, right? Because it really just depends on what goes viral, right? What are people looking at? What does the algorithm throw out there? It's like all those other pieces that really people are consuming all this information that, again, may be right or may not be right.
Right. And as we're all becoming more aware of how we're being manipulated by these type of media, social media and algorithms and these type of things. Yeah. Just click on a video on YouTube and all of a sudden there's 20 different videos in that same category. You're like, okay.
It's crazy.
So if that perception is in the marketplace, so everything is personal in these areas. So if I get food poisoning from this funky yellow drink that I'm drinking here today, right? I'm going to be
I have
mad.
so many questions on that, Bryan.
Oh, no.
It looks like Mountain Dew. It's not Mountain Dew. It's Celsius. It's an energy drink.
It's a really interesting color choice.
It is, isn't it? I should have got a mug for that.
Just manufacture.
If I've been emotionally damaged or hurt by a product, I have a bias against that now. Right? And I'm going to, everything in the public marketplace, I'm going to be advocating against that. Are the people who are commenting out there in those social media spaces unbiased? Probably not. Are they actually working for a competitive company, putting information out there to damage their competitor?
Yeah. Right. And social media, quote unquote, influencers, if you have a certain amount of followings, right, and interactions, they do get paid for their posts. So the benefit or the positives of going viral, right, could be a monetary one.
Yeah. I love my yellow drink.
I feel like we've even kind of been we're going to take that little clip out, Bryan.
Right, I know.
And put, like, I don't know, crickets or, or some voice thing over on it, since you were sharing that with me earlier.
That's awesome.
I feel like we're even kind of straddling into the next question that we had kind of put out for us to talk about today. Like, what topic isn't getting enough attention in food safety right now?
I got a big one here.
Oh, go ahead.
Foreign supplier verification.
Oh.
What leads you to bring that one up? Because in my mind, I'm like, I feel like we've got the horse and we have beat it when it comes to food safety, foreign suppliers.
I don't think companies are getting the message.
Everywhere. What parts are we missing here?
I don't think companies understand just how critical this is, and that FDA really, really focuses in on this. And one of the reasons FDA focuses in on this is it's easy to audit.
Yeah.
All they have to do is pick up the phone and call you and say, "Hi, we're going through our Custom Border Protection logs of entries into the country, and we see this is listed for you as the importer of record. Send us all your stuff.
Yeah.
Here's your 483." Right. And companies don't understand that. Here's something where one of my clients got caught. They had a manufacturer in Canada. And they were doing some stuff, and they had an ingredient up there, and they were going to run a trial for R&D, and they decided not to do it. It's like, oh, okay, we'll just send it back to the warehouse here in the U.S. and we'll try again later. Guess what? That company became the importer of record.
Interesting.
And we're like, oh, no, FDA, right? So I was working with the client with FDA on this, and we're like, oh, no, this is just an R&D sample. This was not even for production or anything else. Okay, we understand that. Did you label it according to the regulation? Because you're required to label it for R&D use only. Oh, let's check on that. Wasn't labeled.
Yeah.
I do like playing devil's advocate, but I agree. As T and I work with some small businesses and we're helping them with suppliers, it's interesting because, right, the big thing is like, oh, we're sourcing this special ingredient from over here. We're like, are you buying it directly, or are you buying it from someone who's bought it? Like that understanding, I would say there isn't a great awareness, and it might depend on organization or different products, but there's definitely gaps. There's definitely gaps in that understanding and what to do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're buying that from Bob's brokerage. Well, that's not the manufacturer.
I think that's like one of the having a broker and trying to understand FSVP. That's like one of the most, I don't even know the word for it, where it's most confusing, maybe the most confusing piece, where people feel like, yeah, they're buying it from a broker, so they're covered. But that 9 times out of 10, and I haven't even had that one time that it hasn't mattered, right? Like that is just not true. They don't take on that responsibility of FSVP. And I think some of those things can be confusing for the industry because people are trying to import into the US, right? They're trying to sell their products here and understand how to do that. But then also I feel like there's like this boom of innovation, right? And so people are reaching outside of the US to figure out like how are other countries being innovative and how are they solving this problem, right, that an entrepreneur sees, but they don't understand the nuances of the regulation and how to actually safely bring product over here into the States. But not just that process, but what are you doing with the actual manufacturer that's outside of the US or the company that's bringing in the ingredient? Do you understand their food safety programs, right? Which is really what FSVP is all about. And I would agree that's a true gap.
You mean it's not just a paperwork exercise? Like I'm supposed to know their programs?
Right.
I'm curious, does anybody else see FSVP like still gaps and this confusion and this as they're working wherever you're at? Is this something that others are seeing as well?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, the last time I checked for inspection observations for FDA, this was the number one thing the FDA was writing people up for.
Which makes sense because I would say FSVP was probably one of the last, before they started talking about traceability, FSVP was one of the last things that they talked about. Now they're reinforcing. They allowed for it to, it was officially into law, but they allowed for a couple of years where they weren't writing 483s, but they were informing you that you do not have FSVP and that it is required by law. But like you said, Bryan, now they've really picked up on issuing those 483s for FSVP.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so part of that as well that people need to think about too is the different categories of ingredients. I was part of a group through GMA, Grocery Manufacturers Association, which is what now the Consumer Brands Association, that worked with FDA on FSVP. And this is when Sharon Mail was still there. And so we were talking with her and working on that. And the company I was working with was a sugar company, right? We refined sugar and we bought sugar from all over the world and things like this. And FSVP, if you're buying commodities, think cocoa, palm oil, sugar, these type of items, these type of commodities are traded all over the world and they are bought and sold in aggregate. You don't buy sugar from a particular mill in Mexico.
Right.
You're buying sugar through that system. And that sugar that you think is coming up to your production facility may get sold in transit because the market pricing in London is better than the market pricing in the US. And so it gets sold off in transit. How do you manage those? And so part of that conversation we had with FDA around that is in these type of situations, you need to look at the risk associated with the commodity versus the manufacturer. And that's an interesting little carve out that if you're buying those things and think about those things, who's not buying palm oil, cocoa, and these sugar? It goes into almost all products. How is your company handling those?
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we see that too in produce where, 10 farmers are really putting it into this one pot that people are buying that produce from.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, right?
Ooh, yeah, that dovetailed into the next one, enhanced traceability. Enhanced traceability.
I don't know if it's not getting enough attention. It's definitely getting attention, but traceability, if you're in an organization that do not have traceability, then like you're already behind, but you need to get started right now
Yeah.
on being able to trace your products, your ingredients, your packaging, really being able to understand how that moves through your system. And if you need to get it back, you can.
And
Right.
dare we add to that? Not only do you need to do it, but really electronically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the other part.
Yeah.
Right. If we're still on paper, it's just really hard to be able to gather information as quickly as needed.
Yeah, and to Tia's point, if you're working in produce, you don't have any time. Right? You've got to pick your product and have it in market now because tick, 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 right? It's very short shelf life on these things. And even if you have all your ducks in a row for your traceability, okay, no, I'm one forward and one back. That's great. But with enhanced traceability, that's not what FDA is saying, right? They're saying, okay, you're part of this entire supply chain.
Right.
And we need to be able to go from the grocery store back to you as the key data holder within 24 hours. We want to skip the logistics. We want to skip the jobbers. We want to skip the warehouses. Those don't impact food safety in most cases, and get to you so we can find that data. And that's where my concern is I don't see, and maybe I'm myopic on this. Maybe I don't see other people what they're doing, but there needs to be lots of conversations on that overall supply chain, starting the way FDA is looking at it, starting at Kroger and Walmart and all these other companies, and saying, okay, how do we make sure that the traceability back to that key manufacturing location, that produce packer, that person who's taking it from the field, assigning that initial lot number for traceability, and then moving that through the supply chain. How do we get to that?
Right.
And I haven't seen a whole lot of activity in that area.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I haven't either. And again, it might just be the spaces that I'm in, which we'll really be curious from the audience on if you're listening. Have you been having conversations around advanced traceability, enhanced traceability, where your organization or organizations that you work with are putting these things into place to be able to track all the way through, get right back to the source.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's also important too, like as we build that out, I think that will be extremely valuable for consumers, right? Not just when something goes wrong, but to be able to communicate, which I don't know how to communicate or why, but being able to communicate that to a consumer to say, we know where this product that you picked from the shelf, we know exactly where it started and where each of those ingredients, where they started. And so understanding that full supply chain, I think that's a transparency that consumers want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that side, Tia, is, and we were talking about this before we went on the air here as well, is when Poison started off, it started off in the grocery store with Bill Marler walking around and giving a tour of the grocery store of the things that worries him. And as I was thinking about that and kind of overlaying that with what you said, what companies do that well, that communication piece? Costco, right? Costco does a fantastic job in that they keep this list of everything I buy. And normally that's just used for marketing purposes. But Costco took it and said, this is an amazing mechanism for letting people know about recalls. So if anything that was sold at Costco pops up on a recall, they contact me, right? That's enhanced traceability, right? They're going back through that chain and saying, oh, hey, guess what? That Kirkland, whatever product you bought, you need to bring that back to the store and we'll give you a refund.
Right. Yeah.
And you get an email on that, which I'm just like, love it.
That's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I think Claire brought up something really important too on like the retail locations that they have donating, right, to random assortments straight to their small partner agencies. Like that's big. I mean, I would even say like donation in general. That's one of the programs that I worked at one of my companies. But even when we're giving employees donated product, how are we tracing that? So that if something comes back, right, and it might not even be you as a manufacturer, it could be an ingredient, right, that someone calls you like, oh, the strawberries you use or the flour you use or, the produce you use, right, is on recall. How are you making sure that you know exactly where you donated those ingredients or products to?
Right. And that's some company's brand, right? And they're very concerned about making sure that their brand is being handled correctly. So what are the systems that these companies you're donating to are they using to maintain food safety?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and we've always had this space too. Like, how do we have systems that support process and consistency so we have good records,
Yeah.
but also have enough agility so that we can do things like Clara, like what you're talking about. Like, we need to move product and sometimes really quickly. And it doesn't mean it's part of our normal process, but are our systems agile enough to be able to also support those type of quick movements that are needed?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, for example, if you're at the grocery store and you're going through the meat section and they have that little bin with the short coated meat that they've discounted, right?
Mhm.
It's like, ooh, oh, I can get a good deal, and you buy that, but right, that you need to make that pretty quick. Right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
How
Yes.
can we set up mechanisms to do that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's important too, like as you're having those conversations with software providers, technology companies to help, is to talk about those areas where this is why it's so important to have someone from food safety in those conversations, because day-to-day things, right? Like that might be captured, but what happens when you need to donate? What happens when you need to donate to this group versus that group? What happens when you need a waste? And when you need to destroy it, but you need to destroy it differently than your normal process. And so understanding those nuances, right, of the business is important, so that when you do bring in a system to help, right, that it also covers those unique situations. Even if they might happen once a month, making sure that they are included is important. So that's how you know if your system is agile.
Yeah, that's a good point. And kind of weighing those risks. So, for
Yeah.
example, there have been several instances in my career where product is in transit on a truck and the truck wrecks. And part of the inventory is damaged and part of it is still intact, right? The truck turned over on its side or whatever, big 18-wheeler. Well, now that logistics company goes back to their insurance company with a claim. And of course, the insurance company wants to mitigate their losses. And so they'll come back to me and say, well, hey, yeah, sure, this truck turned over, but half of it looks like we could still sell it. Can we sell it? Every time I was like, no, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Would that be nice to reclaim that waste in some way? Yes. But I don't know what's happened to it. I don't know what condition it was in. I don't know how long it laid on its slide. I don't know the temperature. I don't know if somebody monkeyed with it. I have no idea.
Right.
Not worth the risk.
You got to get, unfortunately, right? That's really protecting the consumers. I think that goes into, another topic that we talk about. We're all food safety professionals, and the work that we're doing around traceability, around best by dates, around, making those tough decisions every day, right? Like it's a lot of work that goes into being a food safety professional. And we're not the ones that are in the limelight, right? Like we're not the ones that everyone's like, woo, yes, here comes Tia. I mean, they do that for me, but not because
of course, yeah.
Professional. So it's like it's a hard job to have, because we are trying to educate, right? Where we are trying to give knowledge, so people can make science-based decisions. And we're also managing the emotion behind consumers, but also our companies, right? And all the politics that happens around our government.
Right.
Are you doing the lead-in for what I'm hoping we can advocate for, like a Food Safety Professionals Day? Because I think one of the things that stood out as I've heard about poison is that it really hasn't highlighted like the people like you on that are here with us in the community that every single day get up and go to work and work on food safety. And even though we've had challenges over the past few decades, and some will argue, like, have we really gotten anywhere in 30 years? Like, we've been doing a lot of work.
We've been doing a lot of work.
And while we have World Food Safety Day, a lot of that, which is awesome, it raises awareness, but it also is celebrating typically very frontline workers or initiatives organizations are doing. But I think we need something to celebrate food safety professionals. Like we need to feel the love for the work that we're doing.
We do. It's interesting to think about, like, even how to communicate what we do to consumers, right? In the sense of like, I'm sure each of you probably have a story on each of you two on the call, but also people listening on where, you really had to turn up the heat a little bit so the organization will discard all that product or whatever it is we need them to do, right? We need to turn up the heat a little bit. And so like, that's not being comfortable, right? At work, right? Like that's something that you sometimes have to step into, and you have to be uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, right? We have to do all those things that we talk about at Catalyst on, building that leadership skill side on, have you built the relationships? Do you have the safe space? Are you able to, or have you been transparent, right? Do people know and understand who you are? We're doing all those things because there is a time where we have to stand firm, right? And we have to say no, or we have to say yes. And we have to stand in that, even if we have some key people that might not agree.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that ties in nicely, Tia, with some of the comments earlier relative to the poison, and that's credibility. And so when the CEO of that bag lettuce consortium was talking, and he didn't have that information available on the progress that his organization had made, that damaged his credibility. Yeah. And part of what we do, right? And so number one, what we do in food safety is difficult because if we do our jobs well, no one notices because everything's going great.
Right.
But there's a hidden benefit in all this as well, too. And I think it's a superpower that we don't use enough relative to getting things done within an organization, is we have moral authority within organizations. We're the standard bearers. We're the people who are saying, this is good, this is bad, this is pass, this is fail type things. And you need to maintain that integrity. If you damage that, we've all seen situations, we've had colleagues who have compromised in situations where they shouldn't have, and that hurts them.
Yeah.
But being able to set up that credibility is a process that takes a long time. But once you have it, oh my goodness, right? If you have that credibility and the CEO comes to you and says, do we really need to throw this away? And you're able to look at them and say, yes. And that's it. That's when you reach that point. I had a member on one of my teams in the past, a very soft-spoken gentleman, highly intellectual, worked on one of my supply chain teams. And he only spoke when he had something to say. But when he would say, I've got enough thought on this, everybody would, right? Because they knew what he was going to say was important, right? Yeah. So the other side of it is, shouting and screaming and yelling about food safety doesn't work either, because then people just drown you out, right? It's like the noisy TV in the background. You just don't hear it anymore. So you have to be careful on that side as well.
And talk about what's important, right? Yeah. Like if you watch the documentary, you know exactly what Bryan's talking about with this leader at the organization. But I'm also curious on all the companies that's a part of that organization. I wonder if they're screaming at the screen like, say this, say that, say this, say this, because those food safety professionals have been doing real work over this 30 years, right? That really he should have been, as the lead, right, should have been able to say. So I'm also curious on like those food safety professionals. I'm sure they were like, why didn't you mention this really big project that we did, or this project that changed the industry, or this project, right? Like, I'm sure they were there, like, you could have said something, right? You could have said this.
Let me turn that around. Is that the fault of the CEO that he didn't know that?
Now that's a good question. I think that actually leads into what's in our blind spots. And one piece, and we work in it every day, is leadership. When you ask that question, right? Is it his fault that he didn't know, or that he didn't have these points, right? Or that it's not discussed, right? Every time his senior leadership gets together, that's a really valid question. Does the people around him have the leadership skills to be able to even communicate these things, right? To be able to say, like, these are the things we should be talking about from a food safety standpoint every time the senior leadership team get together.
Right.
So that's one side. But I think even as leader, like if we play that out, if the answer is yes, it is their responsibility, then how do we ask questions around what we don't know that we don't know?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, right? As a leader, you still have to be able to be in that space. All because you don't know doesn't mean that you aren't responsible for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think, like you said, the other part is if the answer is yes, that he should have known, then where would that information have come from?
Right.
And I think that's where we talk about this leadership side and how, yes, credibility by far is the foundation of no matter what area or discipline you're in. If you don't have credibility as a leader, things are going to fall apart at some point.
Right.
Right. But there's also this other part, and we're going to actually talk about it next week. Tips for leadership presence.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this whole other aspect as we are looking at how do we become better business partners? How do we enable growth? This is where I think as well, because I experienced it. I thought data will set me free. The science is so straightforward. If we just keep on that, selling that and talking about that and maybe tweaking a little bit, people will get it. And Tia, you hear me say this all the time. They won't get it.
Yeah.
Because if they did, they would have already gotten it. And so as leaders, we have to really step out of our comfort zone, really think about how do we bring a new perspective? Mm-hmm. What is it that we have in our blind spot that needs to be shifted for us to contribute differently?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sometimes I'm going to be the first to say, I had a blind spot. Mm-hmm. I thought I've gone to school for so long. I have 2 masters. I'm a 6 Sigma black belt. I'm an ASQ certified quality auditor, a CFS, all these things.
Yeah.
Guess what? The part that was missing was how do I be a better leader? How do I have better leadership presence in these spaces to be more influential?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the part that as an industry, like I don't hear us talking. Well, I mean, we're talking about it, but I don't hear us as an industry talking about that aspect more and how our leadership is different than Tony Robbins, than you have some of these other, Carnegie, all these other places, and they're great principles, but applying them is the sweet spot. Mm-hmm. That is the deal breaker. That's where the rubber hits the road. And for us, that looks a little different than the traditional leadership models that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it too, right? If you're trying to communicate with the CEO of your company, did he come up through the ranks from quality? Probably not. He probably came from finance or marketing or sales. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't know our world, or she doesn't know our world. Right? Yeah. We have to, and you hear about this phrase, managing up. Mm-hmm. And so part of this is a big educational piece.
It's real.
And it's always remembering too that they're people, and people focus on what they know and what they're comfortable with. Yes. And I learned a valuable lesson at one of my companies, and in that I was presenting the month's quality report to senior leadership, and I went in, big old stack of information like you're talking about, Jill. And there was a couple of issues that I wanted to talk about and things like that, but they didn't want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. As I observed the meeting, it was clear that the CFO was mad at the head of operations for some reason. Mm. And when I talked about the complaint rate, he immediately attacked the operations guy and said, "What are you doing about this? This is why our financials are blah, blah, blah." Right. And then they started arguing. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Okay.
Right? And so everybody has their perspective. Everybody has what they're concerned about. Right. So you have to figure out a way to make that relevant to them. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And understand that those interpersonal actions happen at every level.
Mm-hmm. They do at every level. I think one thing that a food safety professional can take away from poison is how can you take this information, take it back to your organization and apply it, or I would say talk with your senior leaders about the pieces of that documentary that's important to them. So, it's one of the things I talked about this a lot doing IFP, but this whole concept of telling people the why, like tell them the why, I think is missing some words. It's really tell them why they should care, right? And that might be different from why I care and why Jill, you care, and Bryan, you care, right? Tell them why they should care about whatever's going on. And so like when I think about if I was still in industry, or, you know, even if I was at the organization, right, that the CEO didn't have the answers, he probably really cares about this documentary and what it's saying about him in his organization. So if he doesn't have someone with food safety at the table, right, tell him why he cares about having someone that is there talking to him, giving him this information so he's better prepared to have these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Tell him why he cares about this. And same with other organizations.
Well, I'm going to tweak on that a little bit, because I think when we tell people why they should care, they're like, you don't know why I should care.
Oh, you have to know.
But I think we need to find out what's important to them.
Exactly.
Have them care. We need to find out why we sense that they're not caring.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about being curious, because I think too often what we've heard for so long is tell people why. I could care less what your why is. Why is it important to me? Exactly. And now we start this conversation about like, gosh, how does that make a difference for me? Or why do I seem to not care? Now we're making progress.
Oh, such a great point, Jill, right? Like it has to be actually.
I know that's what you were saying anyway, so I just wanted to like throw that out.
It's such a great point to say, because you have to actually know what they care about. Right. So all the things that, you know, we kind of talked throughout the show on like understanding people, right, and building those relationships and all of those things, building that credibility. It's all about understanding people's values and beliefs in their whole lives at work, why they're here, right? So that you can communicate back why your role impacts their values and their beliefs. And that right there takes time, right? An intention to do. You can't just show up one day knowing everyone's why, right? You can't just, some people you'll know their why as soon as you talk with them. Some people you got to talk to them for a little while to understand their why. So I think that's a great point, Jill, because people try to skip that step, or they assume that your why is my why.
Yeah,
because we all are operating under the same company values, which that's a whole nother show, because my values are not my company values necessarily, or my interpretation, so later this month, if you're curious about that at all, we are going to do a show about top down or bottom up and how that influences our leadership and our food safety culture.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think something that the Poison documentary did really well, it's kind of answering this question that we're talking about here, is, so Bill had said this a couple points in there, that we all eat, right? And so sometimes companies forget that they're making food, and then they follow that up with two very key stories relative to how a lack of diligence in that area impacts people and causes deaths and serious illness. And I think they did a good job then of communicating that to people so that they could say, oh my goodness, that could happen to my family. Right? My child could eat some tainted food and end up in a hospital overnight. Right. This is serious, right? So they made it relatable, right? And getting out of that abstract way of looking at things from a technical standpoint, people don't relate to that. They need to relate to the emotional. And it gets back to what Larry was talking about here earlier as well. And I think they did a great job in this show of doing that.
Tapping into that emotion, right? Like us as leaders, we have to learn how to do that.
Yes.
Right. And we really have to perfect that piece of it so we can be more influential.
And I think, like Larry says, it's how do we help solve the problems? We're supposed to help be business enablers. Doesn't mean we say yes to everything. It doesn't mean we say no to everything. How do we help enable business? And Bryan, as you said, help be the moral authority. Help know, how do we keep it like on the road versus heading for the ditch.
Right.
Those are the things that we contribute. So.
Yes.
Woo.
Bryan,
fast.
And we enjoyed you being on the show today.
Great talk.
Such a great conversation. And we covered so many topics. And, you know, we do hope the audience can take at least one thing away to say, you know, I'm going to watch the documentary, right, and get my own thoughts around it. But also, you know, what impact can I make at my organization, to consumers, right, or even to industry?
Yes. Yeah, and great comments from everyone. Thank you. Appreciate all the comments. Really good.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bryan, for being here.
Yeah.
I know we'll be with you Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 8 Mountain.
Yes.
Sorry, time conversions.
I know,
Like she's sitting over there going, Jill, don't even try.
I'm like, Jill,
stop at 9 Central.
Jill was the absolutely worst with time zone. So I'm literally looking at her like, are you really going to try to do all
I'm not going to try. Just join us on Friday for Bryan's show. We've got a great show talking about networking.
Yes.
And of
notes
course,
are already prepared and ready. Yeah.
We are. And we're going to be back here next week. Like I said, next week is tips for developing leadership presence.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't wait to share about that.
Absolutely. And if you've been in this conversation and you're like, man, I really do need to start focusing on how I can become a better leader, how I can be a better influencer, how I can build my credibility, then join us at boot camp. Our fall cohort is open. We're super excited about it. It starts September 12th. And so the doors are open. You can join us right now. So we'll make sure we add a link for you or reach out to Jill or myself. We're happy to share information, but I mean, we have to start leading differently if we want a different outcome.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Well, we will see you all next week. Thank you for joining us. And have a great week. See you on Friday.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.